Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to continue my Trails of Cold Steel 4 discussion. If you have not seen the 3 previous parts before, go ahead and check those out. But something that was kind of going through my mind is something I brought up in the previous parts. I talked a little bit about. It's a whole Divine Knight situation. I think it is pretty dope, you know, the whole rivalry thing, making Divine Knight battles. Obviously, like, as each game has progressed, it's become much bigger and bigger things. Because obviously, Soldats and Divine Knights only got introduced at the very end of 1. Obviously, you fight more Soldats in 2, and you only fight 1 Divine Knight in 2, and that's Crow. But the rest are like Soldats. And it's actually interesting because in 3, you're fighting all those Ions, and you actually don't have any Divine Knight fights at all. Because you fight the Holy, you fight the Dark Dragon, you fight the Holy Beast. That's about it. So you don't, you know, but now in 3, you're facing against Crow, Rudger, Rufus, Leanne, Cedric, and then, you know, obviously Osborne at the end. So I thought that was such a pretty dope element of them including that, and I thought that was such a pretty dope element. Also, they introduced the new Soldats. They're the Zauber Soldats. You come across them way, like, they're in it a little more than regular Soldats. I like, obviously from time to time certain things will introduce other Soldats, but it's mainly Zauber Soldats that you end up going up against because they're like the new breed. They're kind of feeding off, you know, they kind of operate on the curse and kind of feed off the curse. So those are like very dangerous machines. And obviously, like, you end up meeting like Mary and Makarov, which we'll get to that in a second. They kind of use it, and like that's kind of part of like the training at the main campus, was to kind of get the students prepared at using those, which obviously those are very dangerous to use. But I do like that every time you win a rivalry, not only does like Valimar get more powers, he actually changes because he becomes a lot more, as they say, like knight-like. Because I didn't really realize it, you know, because obviously when you get Valimar back, when Reen kind of gets out of, you know, kind of gets back, you know, comes back to his senses, like Valimar still got the horns and everything, but then like he transforms, and you know, I'm curious, well, because I was about to say he gets it in the end, because I was about to say what would have happened when he got Leanne's full power. He gets it in the end because he gets his wings. But that whole situation was just pretty dope to see, like, that transformation. And it is kind of dope that you get special abilities as the game progresses. Like, your HP goes up, your speed goes up depending on one of you beat. And then I think it was after you beat Rudger, you it might have been Rudger, it might have been, I think it was Rudger. Like, after you beat him, you can channel anyone, even the characters that are still on the Courageous 2, you can summon them to be your allies during the whole situation. So I thought that was kind of fascinating that you could, like, you know, because it was their way to kind of get around the fact is, because they kind of do it a little bit in 3 where you can pretty much use, I mean, they do it in 2 as well, where you can, like, basically when you have the entire party that you can pretty much, some occasions they lock you into whatever party members you have, but other occasions they basically give you access to the whole party for your, as your secondary contractors. But I just thought that was like a dope element of them implementing that, especially like, and I thought it was so interesting because it literally isn't an element in the show until, I mean, into the game until the very end, because it's after you beat Cedric, you unlock the ability to enhance Valimar's power by, like, you know, it's a, basically you can do a an order as a divine, but it's only in that, like, so you only get to really use it. You get to use it in the Rufus fight and the Osborne fight, but that's about it. I also do like that McBurn does give you, like, an ability, which we'll get to McBurn soon enough. But since I brought them up, I want to talk about the fact you see Mary and Makarov at the beginning of it. I was like, which that even got me thinking about the fact that you run into Emily and Theresia pretty early on in the game. We as the audience see them. Elisa and them don't meet them until, like, they get us aboard that ship. And Lisa and Angelica fight them, which that was pretty dope. It's like, oh, especially because there's a moment later on, like, it's where you go to do the Alan saving, you know, Officer Allen or Warrant Officer Allen quest, and it's like literally, like, if you have Lisa in your party, they comment on the fact is that the entire lacrosse the entire lacrosse club is together, because, like, Emily and Theresia are there, and so is Ferris, and if you have Lisa in your party, it's just a dope little thing. Because obviously, like, they're much like everyone else, like, they signed up for the military, because you hear about them in 3 that they joined the military, because they because actually it's actually a dope thing, because if you actually go to Leaves at one point in time, you'll actually run into Emily talking to her brother about him not liking, like, you know, it's like come home and just, you know, but for her, she has her duty because she joined the military. It's a choice she made, so like we have to stick with it. But even they started questioning what they were really doing, you know. But it's like everyone else. It's like we have our orders at the end of the day. We might not like them, but we kind of have to follow them. And it's just how the chain of command works and everything like that. So I just thought that was an interesting element. But getting back to Marriott and Makarov, like seeing them again, especially because Reen faces off against them, and it's like, you know, running into his instructors again, and it's too bad you couldn't. You hear about the vice principal, but you don't get to meet him, and obviously you don't get to see Beatrix either. But it was still dope enough just to get, you know, them. It's almost like having all your instructors again, because obviously you're running into Thomas from time to time, and obviously you run into Nightheart, and obviously Sarah's with you all the time. So I thought that was pretty dope. But aside from all of that, like the fact is, when you're a Michelin, like I love, like, obviously it's like the day before everything, and like Mitt's still doing her thing, trying to hook her uncle and Mary up, and obviously like how Mary's dad plays a role in this, because Mitt called him up to talk to Makarov, and they're like, well, let's kind of make this official. And then Mary's like, wait, what? We're making this official? And then they're getting, I'm like, oh, it's super adorable, which makes me think about Oliver proposing to Schera, and he's like, maybe I shouldn't be listening to this. But then Oliver's like, Reen finds out later on, like, oh, Oliver knew that I was overhearing that. But it was just kind of like, it was super adorable, the moment they had, because obviously his part to play in the drinking contest, because he had gotten them some stuff that helps with that, because he knew they'd probably go overboard. Particularly, he knew Schera was going to go overboard, but he drunk some ahead of time. It was supposed to be basically like a hangover cure, but it ended up making. I love that one point in time, like you see him talking to Schera, and like part the way through the conversation, his one eye turns into a swirl, kind of like anime style. Like I said, because only one character really does like expressions like that, and it's Milliam. So to see Olivert kind of have one like that when he's just kind of a little drunk and stuff like that, I thought was pretty dope. I didn't talk about it, but I should, like, you know, because I keep forgetting to bring it up, but talking about, like, you know, Oliver and them being alive. But I love what they did with the whole courageous situation, because obviously at one point in time, there's a point where, like, I think it's Mitt, Monk, and someone else, like, nearby, being like, oh, I thought we were going to have to step in, but I guess we don't. I think it was Vivi, because obviously Rex kind of takes over for Veve in this game of, like, being the, you know, photographer, because obviously they both work for the Imperial Chronicle. But obviously it turns out they were, like, the reason why you hadn't heard from any of them, like Linde either, or Becky, is because they were secretly working with Oliver, because he was still alive. Like, once again, he kept this so secret, this so low-key, yet so many different people from different backgrounds were working on this. So they kind of have, you know, the courageous to, you know, take flight and everything. But for everyone to be a part of it. Speaking of Monk, I love that Monk does have, like, that side quest. It's very similar to the one you have in 3, where basically you have, like, you have to choose between Linde, Rosine, Becky, and Mitt. Basically, you have to choose one of them, because obviously, once again, because they even reference it in this, like how, like, the character he created in 3 happens to look a lot like Reen right now. And even Reen was like, yeah, I'm not even going to have a conversation about how the fact is I look exactly like this fictional character that you based on me, but the design was supposed to be different from mine, but now it looks exactly like me. But I thought it was pretty dope what they did in this. Rather than you choosing one character to bring with you for that, you do 4, because it's Veve, Edo, Dorothy, and I'm blanking on the other one right now. Beryl. You do all 4 of them, like, it's, you know, so I thought that was pretty dope. Like, they made that quest kind of come full circle, but this time, instead of just choosing one of the 4, you get to do it with all 4, so I thought that was pretty dope. And since I brought him up earlier, we do have to talk about McBurn. Now, that was interesting, because, like, McBurn's thing has always been like, yo, I'm looking for a fight, but then, like, when you fight him in the Viscount, he's like, yeah, I was mainly here to see how that whole thing plays out, but he's like, yeah, I think this is set in a perfect stage, and he ends up, you know, this shadowy being shows up, and it's like, wait, what's that? It looks like a demon or something. It's like, that's McBurn's real form. And so we find out a lot more about McBurn, that, like, he isn't from, he's like, I don't care what happens in this world. And it's like, what does he mean by that? It's like, he's, and because obviously Emma brings it up in 2. She talks about the divergent laws, but you never really find out too much about what that means. Well, it turns out McBurn's whole situation is he's technically not from Zemeria, because it's like, it's this whole thing, and this is where things get really interesting, because basically it gets a little existential, because it's like, basically, like, it's like if you try to go past, you can only leave Zemeria to a certain extent before you're just unable to. Whether it's just because of technology, maybe not, or whether it's just the way things are, you can never go past a certain point. So it's like, basically look at Zemeria as a Earth. Like, you can never get to space, but obviously for them there are other worlds out there. Now, whether it's necessarily dimensions, because basically what they're saying is that Adios created Earth, but Zemeria, but beyond Zemeria there are other things outside of that, and that's the divergent laws. Because obviously for Gaius, it's this complicated thing where it's like, because he's part of the Grossritter, the church acknowledges this, recognizes it, but chooses to ignore it. It's like, as long as it doesn't interfere with everyday life, because things from outside of Adios, because obviously a lot of people chalk certain things like the salt pill that hit Northumbria, like that's treated as like something from Adios, but it's like, no, like, but there's no other way to really kind of put it. So it falls in the category of those divergent laws, like whatever this world is that because McBurn talks about the fact is he's half human and half a being from another world until they came together, but them coming together made him lose his memory, so he doesn't even remember what the world he came from looks like. But that's when because obviously Reem remembers, like, they're talking to Pantagruel. He's like, you asked if I was mixed, but now he's like, or this is what you meant by when you said all of you. Because obviously, like, every game you see a little bit more of McBurn. Obviously, like, you know, because you even fight McBurn, and I think it's actually pretty dope. Because obviously when you fight him in the Black Workshop, he summons his sword. It's actually, he doesn't have it out all the time. It's one of his it's basically one of his crafts. He even does it in his full demon form. It's actually interesting because you actually don't even get a full good look. Like, you see him grab it and then he slashes you. You don't even get a really good look at it. Because I guess, to be fair, this thing isn't supposed to exist in this dimension, but still. It was actually interesting that basically McBurn was looking for someone really powerful to fight. That's why he wanted this rivalry situation to get played out, because he figured this could be the perfect opportunity. Like, if he goes toe-to-toe with Osborn, because that'd be someone so powerful, he'd be able to, like, go all out without having to worry about destroying anything. But this presented the opportunity. He was able to go full force. I even think it's interesting because partway through the fight he summons up a barrier, because this was one of those, and they actually make a note of this is one of the only battles in the game that boss fights that lets you summon like your because you're supposed to bring out everything for this fight, because it's McBurn. You're going up against the #1 enforcer, one of the strongest beings in existence in this universe. So it's like, he's on another level, so you might need to, like, call upon Valve. So this is one of the few fights you could do that, which that's even a conversation I talk about too, because, like, much like 2, you could summon Valimar as a one-off thing in each battle. I like that they did bring that back, because you can do it with Crow, with Ordine, and you can do it with Valimar. Those techniques actually get stronger because you get, like, a summon Ordine too. I like that Altina gets one, but hers isn't the same way, because obviously you can actually miss this, because it's a sub of it getting her to summon the Goliath. Obviously, she ends up purging the system, any extra coding and stuff like that. Obviously, they figure, like, yeah, this was part of, like, the Black Workshop's plan. Obviously, they were planning this for a long time, trying to get Altina to be, you know, the sword of the end. But it is actually kind of sad in the end when you actually think about it, because it's like, Milliam never gets Lammy back. It makes you wonder, like, when it's all said and done at the end, and I know I'm jumping around, but I'm wondering, will she ever get her own version of Lammy? Because at least, you know, Altina still has Clown Soleus when it's all said and done, but it's kind of sad to think Milliam will never have Eric Gatlin again. I guess, like, because of her whole circumstance, he will always be a part of her, an extension of her. So maybe that's kind of how you look at it, or maybe eventually, because they don't really showcase, like, whether or not she ever gets a combat show kind of replacement, or like a new Eric Gatlin. I'd like to believe that something comes about that. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it does. It's just something to think about. But I like that they introduced that, and, like, not only them, but, like, all of New Class 7 can do it too. Like I said, even Altina, like, even though her, like, having the Goliath isn't part of the story point, that, like, hey, like, when it's time to use Soldats, she doesn't get to summon the Goliath. It would have been dope, but it makes sense why that's just kind of like a side thing. But if you want to, in battle, you can summon the Goliath, but you can summon, like, all the other Soldats for each character. Eunice can summon her, Turt, Muse, and Ash can summon theirs. So I thought that was pretty dope. But circling back to like the whole McBurn thing, I like the point was like, because that's how you beat him. Reen has to summon Valimar at the end, and he breaks through the barrier, and that's how you can finish it. Because at the end, you drop his HP like to like beating him, but he'll always have like 50 HP points, and then you have to, because he has like a perfect barrier up, so you have to summon Valimar to break through. So I thought that was interesting. But when it was all said and done, he was like, yeah, I remember what's going on. He's like, yeah, sorry for all the trouble I caused. And everyone's like, you see the dots, the ellipses above everyone's head, and it turns into an exclamation point. Everyone's like, wait, what? Even Ash called him out. He's like, what the hell do you mean sorry? What, you're just going to be like, all the trouble you caused, you're just going to be like, yeah. He's like, sorry about that. And he actually gives you a gift, and you can actually use that in the fight against Osborn. It's basically a one-off item where basically it heals all your HP, and it recovers, it gives you, I think, recovers your CP, and it gives you like max BP. So I looked into the guide. It's an item obviously you can't carry over, so it's like you might as well use it. I went ahead and used it in an Osborn fight, but if you didn't, you probably could. Well, because I was about to say, because that technique he uses, like that Erebos technique, is nuts. Even how that's represented, because it basically shows like the end of the world getting covered in darkness and then exploding, and that's the technique, and it does like a massive amount of damage. Regardless, tangents and all that, but that was interesting because even McBurn was like, yeah, I'm gonna have a talk with Campanella and the Grandmaster. He's like, I might even have to have a talk with Vita, and it's like, what did he remember? Like, what is that about? That's not your concern for right now. That's probably going to be a future game issue. But obviously, Reen was like, McBurn, try not to be a burden in the future. He's like, can't make any promises, but I'll try. And it's like, so obviously, McBurn's just out there now. Whether he's a part of Ouroboros, like how that whole thing played out, because like there's very few people. Because remember, he made that whole conversation with her and with Leanne in 3 where he was like, yeah, I won't lose against you, but I won't ever win against you, you know? So that was always kind of like his thing. Like they would always kind of, it would never be a loss in his side, but he would never win against Leanne. So I don't know, I thought that was thing was kind of, you know, fascinating in its own right. This whole conversation, because I keep bringing him up, but I love the whole thing with Crow. I love him being part of Class 7 again. I was hoping things would play out the way they do, but it's like, you know, because at the end of the day, like, it was the biggest thing, like, everyone has, like, where it's like, Milliam and Crow and Ring, none of them knew what this meant when they ended the Great Twilight. The Great Twilight is the reason why they're immortal in the first, at least he's immortal, and it allowed Milliam, you know, this was her purpose as a sword of the end, so it's like, and Ring being the sacrifice, it's like, at the end of the day, we don't know what's going to happen in the moment they end it. Because even at one point, and I think maybe this changes depending on the character you're close to, because for me it was Elisa, but maybe it changes on who you're close to. Because like when they're having that conversation about what happens next, like Elisa turns and looks at them as kind of like, like she felt like, so like I said, I'm sure it's probably whatever character's closest to Reen, but you know, or maybe it is always going to be Elisa. I don't know. I mean, you know, but regardless, I thought that was just such an interesting moment. You know, it's actually, you know, since I'm talking about like that whole thing, it is interesting that they do finally get to that point where Elise admits how she feels to Reen, because that's part of like her bonding events. And it's actually kind of sad that they make a point that like whoever Reen chooses that isn't Elise, and he makes it be like, hey, I'm sorry, like you don't see the conversation, but they make it clear that he has to break the news to Elise in particular. Like that was kind of like, I don't know whether maybe that was because Elise was the last person I had talked to before, like, you know, setting up the whole thing with Elisa. Maybe that's why, but I feel like they made a point, because I don't know whether Elise is supposed to be like the, you know, maybe in her own right, kind of like the canonical ending. Whatever the case may be, that was a little, I was like, oh, you didn't say that about him doing that with any other person like Yuna, Emma, Laura, or Fee, but you made such a point about Elise, which makes me feel even more guilty, because obviously like everyone's kind of aware of how Elise feels about Reen. Obviously he's the only one that's kind of, you know, always been blind to it. But it was interesting that they made a point, you know, because obviously the whole relationship aspect is like, I'm gonna tell you how I feel. I don't need a response right now. I just need to tell you how I feel, because like obviously the same thing with like Toa and Alpha, you know. So I just thought that was just, you know, interesting how they handled that. I'm one of those people, like every time I did the second and third subsequent playthroughs, I always did everything, because obviously 1 and 2 you have a point system. 3, I just wanted to be able to do everything while also being able to enjoy the pace of the game without it being too difficult. So I didn't carry over my levels in my second playthrough of 3, and I didn't carry over my items. I just increased my bonding events and certain other things. Obviously, I brought everything over my 3rd playthroughs, my levels, my abilities, all so on and so forth. I carried all of that over, but obviously with 1 and 2 you have to like play through the game multiple times to unlock everything. The first thing I always unlocked was the increased number of bonding points, because obviously I think in 1 I don't think it's a thing in 2. It might be, I don't think so. I think in 2 you can get every character profile thing on the first playthrough if you know everything, but I think in 1 you definitely can't do it because of the limited number of bonding events. So you have to do it during a second playthrough in 1, but in 2 you can get it all done in 1 playthrough. But regardless, like I always carried over my notebook and my bonding, because that's your map, because like bonding events cost like 4 points. I'm going on a whole tangent, but that's why I mainly did a second normal playthrough my second time through for 1 and 2. Obviously like 3, I was just at that time I hadn't touched a nightmare difficulty on any other 3 games, because I went through all of them like a second time, and then I circled back through and did a 3rd playthrough for each one, like back to back to back. So I didn't know what to really expect, so that's why I didn't do a nightmare run on my second playthrough of 3. But regardless, I went on this huge tangent for like no reason, because I'm actually forgetting where I was actually going with all of that in the first place. Right, the ending. Like, so basically my point was like, you'd most likely probably get it through, because most people probably won't look up a walkthrough. Like I said, I'm one of those people who likes to do everything again and again. So like, the point I was making is like on 2nd and 3rd playthroughs of each game, I still went and did every quest, just because like being able to carry over some of those items, because I didn't do it the first time, but I did it the second time, like being able to carry over grail lockets and all the medals you unlock, especially the medals in 4 are so damn good. Like the top one you get in 4, like whereas a grail locket can only prevent like status elements, so like poison, seal, death blow, stuff like that, it also prevents stat down. I was like, that's stupid good. Obviously it erases your stats, because there's a version of that in 3 as well. I think there's one in the other ones as well, but it's just like this one prevents stat down as well. I was like, this is like the perfect immunity one, and obviously you'll get one like every subsequent playthrough, especially if you carry stuff over. But regardless, I went off some huge tangents. Like I was talking about the ending and stuff like that, because I have to circle back to, because I thought it was interesting, because like I said, you would get the normal ending, and then like you have to reload your save, but you can reload your save after the fight against Ishmelga, and that way you don't have to redo it. You can if you want to. You can go back before Osborne and fight Osborne again, and also fight Ishmelga again, or you could just do it afterwards, with obviously being the easier choice. Because the other thing I forgot to talk about a little bit, like I said, was like the whole Crow thing, like, you know, Ring like pushing for Crow to survive and not give up. Like rather than taking the Azure Knight's power, he gave some of it back to make sure that he stuck around. Granted, when this was all said and done, like Crow knew the entire game, he was on limited time. Toa, Angelica, George, even at Michelin, like Ring's like, they are talking around it. It's there, but none of them are talking about it because they want to enjoy the time they have together. And obviously I even like that, like obviously them being buddy, like, you know, like like in battle, like your win quote, like, you know, Crow slaps Ring's back and is like, attaboy there, Ring, and Ring's like, I couldn't have done it without you, Crow, you know. And it's like, because those are like their history, them being the best buds that they are. I thought, you know, I always love that, and them being partners in the Divine Knight battles and stuff like that. But just their history and just the ups and downs, especially for Ring, he finally got Crow back, because Crow was himself again, and just, you know, knowing that at the end it's like, no, I got to be a little more optimistic. And I had a feeling, I was hoping something at the end of the day was going to make it. I was thinking like, if Valimar became the Great One, I was like, maybe then he can help with the Millium thing and the Crow situation. But I thought it was interesting how they handled the normal ending, because obviously like the curse becomes too much and it's trying to get to Ring, but Ring's like, if I go to the atmosphere, like obviously because of this, Ishmelga is in this world, has a physical, like his physical body's kind of been torn away, but it's like he's in a physical form that if I destroy him now, he's dead. So he flies into the atmosphere, and obviously everyone's upset, like, Ring, don't do this, there has to be another way. But he flies into the air and he's like, I'll see you guys again. And you know, and Crow and Milliam go with him. It's like, we were on borrowed time anyway, and they die together, and those feathers come down, and everyone's like sad, and it like Yuna's like, don't worry, you guys, our instructor, you know, New Class 7 is with her, was saying like he promised he'd come back. I thought it was interesting because I thought the true ending was going to pick up after that. I was like, oh, we're going to get to that point, and then the rest of it's going to be like, okay, the true ending starts here. Kind of similar to how Final Fantasy X-2's true ending, because the normal ending hints to the true ending, you just don't get the full scale of everything. I thought it was going to be like that, but it's like, no, because obviously the Franz thing plays differently, because if you got the normal ending, like obviously he's still Black Albert, but you get the true ending, he turned back into Franz, and like obviously you could front, like obviously Rean using like the 8 leaves spirit unification, he ends up purging Ishmelga from him because of his 8 leaves training, but also like relying on so many people. He had to, like, what he'd already done to kind of bring himself back from being taken over by the curse at the Black Workshop, he did like a completed form of this. I think now being a divine blade and just finally, all after everything, you know, that unity of having everyone by his side, he was able to kind of break through, and they were able to reach out to everyone, asking for everyone's help, so everyone participates in this final battle. It's actually a pretty dope battle, and just like all the people you could get on your side, like obviously like the Stall Ritter, Team Libero, Team Crossbell, you can get Zeno and Leo, which is pretty dope, because obviously they help you with the other salt pails, the other pails that had to be taken down before you get to the Imperial Fortress. So, but obviously when that's all said and done, when Ishmael gets destroyed, and obviously Rean goes after, and Milliam falls him. Like I said, it's that moment like it eventually turns into the sword because it's scared and stuff like that. And Rean is like, honestly, this is just as much humanity's fault. Like, you're literally a representation of all our anger and strife and malice. It turns you into what you are. And it's like, he's like, I don't know what's going to happen to you after this, but I hope you find your way to Adios' side. And he's got, like, Milliam turns into the sword, and he's got her like that. I was almost hoping he'd do his Breaking Dawn with Milliam, and that's what I was talking about earlier. Like, maybe it'd be cool if there's an item that lets Rean's Tachi turn into Milliam, much like Osborne used, you know, Ishmael's sword during the fight. Like, I think that'd be pretty dope. But either way, the fight ending like that, you know, and also obviously he saw Rutger and Osborne and Leanne, because obviously for them, you know, the moment Valimar had absorbed the other knights' powers, he had absorbed their souls too, so they were there to kind of lend their aid, as well as Osborne. And for Rean, it's kind of the sad thing, you know, it's like, you know, he's like, Osborne had talked about the fact is that he had wished that he was able to raise, he's a little jealous that he wished he had raised, you know, he's like, you know, because like obviously your master got to teach you swordsmanship. He's like, I wonder what would have happened if I was able to teach you. But obviously Rean understands that at the end of the day, his dad was just as much of a victim. You know, much like Leanne and Rean, he has the hard trouble of like doing stuff on his own. So he thought he, in his own way, being corrupted by the curse, but also doing things his way, he thought this could be his way to kind of break the curse by bringing it into this world, you know. So it worked out in the end, but obviously he was corrupted by the curse because he was, you know, he lost his wife and he wanted to save Rean's life, you know. And it's like, you know, you're just as, you know, it's like you're just as much my son, Teo's son, as you are mine. Just like you know, your mom is just as much, you know, your mom is Elise's mom is your mom. And even to a certain extent, because of their relationship back when he was Emperor Drykull's, it kind of makes you almost, because even Leanne's like, I kind of, if I did have a son, I'd kind of want him to be a little, I always imagined because obviously when she looks at the Stall Ritter, she sees her kids, but when she sees Rean, I think she sees it too, because it's a reminder of the men that she fell in love with. She was in love with all those years ago that she never, you know, fully ever let go of, you know. And obviously that was the hardest thing for her. It's like, neither one of you wanted to trouble me if you had just let me know ahead of time, you know. But it's just like all those realizations and revelations that, you know, that Rean at the very end referring to him as dad. It's like, you know, they never really had it. It's like now at the end of it all, I finally get to know the real you, understand what you went through. Because obviously everyone had their opinion about the Blood and Iron Chancellor, but for this to be their opportunity to be like, hey, like I get to finally meet the real you, and sadly it's at the end. You know, it's like Elisa, like you would hope that she was able to get her dad back in the end, but she was, but only for a little bit of time. Because that was interesting too, because obviously I think there was a part of Irina that was hoping that maybe if she went with them and worked with them, that maybe, hey, the man I fell in love with still be there, but it's like, no, you know, and that's her way of being like, hey, so Sharon, you need to come back to us, because that's not, the whole deal was if Franz returned. This is Black Alberic, not Franz. So your deal with us is still on. And so Sharon is able to return to the Reinfords again, return to Elisa in particular. So I thought that was pretty dope. But then there's also, you know, the whole thing about, you know, it's just this sweet and sad situation at the very end. You know, but once again, even Osborn's final thing to him at the end, it's like, obviously our whole thing is about self-sacrifice, but don't do that. Don't throw you have your entire life in front of you. Like, there's still room, like, obviously my life ends here, but yours, you still have so much of a life left to live, Reen. Do not throw it away. The fact of the matter is, don't throw it away on self-sacrifice. Rely on the people. The people around you want to protect you just as much as you want to protect them. And it's like, right, that's always been something Rain's always had to struggle. He's like, I'll take those words and advisement. So with the curse broken, he's able to return to normal. Like, his hair goes back and his eyes go back, and they're like, hey, the black hair looks better on you, Instructor Reed. So, but obviously because of the miracle they are able to do as you know, all the other 6 divine knights being there, they were able to bring Crow back to life, you know. And it's like, this is the one life, you only get one life, this is Crow's second chance, so do make it count, don't squander it. And obviously for Valimar, it's like, you know, this is the last time we'll get to, you know, see each other. And it's just like, you know, it's like, after everything they've been through, they've been together for the past 2 years, you know, not really 2 years, but year and some change, you know, because they've been together since the end, and obviously their relationship developed over the course of 2 as well, you know. But it's like, you're my partner, and he's like, the fact of the matter is, you know, as I couldn't be more proud to have you as my awakener. I'm so proud of the man that you've grown up to be, that I consider you my true friend. I'm like, oh, dude, that's so heartbreaking. And obviously there's a whole Millium thing too, but then like Franz is like, oh, Reen, Eustace, and Altina, you might want to stop at the Black Workshop. And it's like, oh, so you can figure that's probably about bringing Millium back. But yeah, dude, and it's just like, it's this bittersweet ending, but it's like, well, is this the end of the Divine Knights, or will it be a thing that they will eventually awaken again? I mean, this was like they kind of served their purpose of becoming. So they said we're going to have to return to our world. So I'm wondering, or they come from the same plane of existence that McBurn does, or maybe there's something else there. But this might be the final times they pop up in this world. Granted, there might not be any more Divine Knights, but there are Soldats, which, regardless, as we've seen in 3, Ring can easily pilot a Soldat too, just because of all the training he did. Obviously with Valimar, it helps him with Soldats, but obviously he did Soldat training regularly when he was training New Class 7, him and Randy in 3, you know. So, but when it's all said and done, like, obviously everything is kind of, you know, resolved at the end. Everyone's together. It's like, we saved the day, we saved the world. Obviously, there's the whole situation of stopping the war. Like I said, I thought was interesting because there's still, I think it's pretty dope that not everything's completely resolved, that there are still world issues that are still in play here. It's like, basically, Calvert got, what was it? Compensated for like the damages and the deaths and stuff like that. Like, the Empire was forced to, like, obviously, like, you know, you have Claire and Lecter who are still in their positions. Rufus is the one that decided to take all the blame because it was kind of on him. You know, it's like they're still going to need you guys when it's all said and done to make sure that everything kind of goes smoothly. Obviously, Lecter's also got to keep his promise to Claudia, like, you know, meeting up with them again. So that's kind of an interesting side of things as well. But it's also like, obviously the guilds are back in play. Like, all the guilds that were closed are open. Like, it makes you wonder like how much of the truth is out there, because like, well, they explained that Gilead is dead. They also explained that like the Emperor is still alive and he's fine, but also it wasn't someone from Calvert. So obviously the people of the Empire were worried about Calvert striking back for like this, because like now that the curse is broken, people are a little more rational again. It was just an interesting, you know, situation where it's like I said, a lot of the world implications are still there of like, you know, obviously once again like the whole Prince Cedric, because he felt like he would not get the punishment he deserves if he came back, because they would never throw their prince in, you know, their crown prince in jail. And even it'd probably get pushed onto Oliver and Alfin, like any pushback against him would get pushed onto them, because one of them would be pushed to be like, hey, one of you needs to be the next in line to take the throne. So that's a whole complicated thing. But when it's all said and done though, just to me, and it's my new PS background, because I do this because I did it for 2, like the ending of 2 where it's like that picture of them all after the festival. That's been my background for such a long time. But the picture at the end of 4 where it's everyone at Prince Olivert and Schera's wedding, that one is you know, it's like everyone's like all dressed up and stuff. At one point in time you see Ash getting alcohol, but like Reen snatching it from him. Like just seeing everyone, like I said, all the squad characters you're not familiar with, characters I'm only familiar with because they popped up in this game, but like obviously Liberal people, Crossbell people, but still it's nice to see everyone together. New Class 7, Old Class 7, Alfin, Elise, Toa, Angelica, George, Crow. It's, and you know, Milliam got her new body back and everything, and I love like Uses and Altina hugging her, and it's like, because at that point it had been like 6 months since the end of the game, so obviously Reen wearing his jacket again. We also see at the very end he is back at Brent, because I was wondering, like, when it was all said and done, would he go back to being an instructor, because it's like, well, he's still got his students to look after, and whatever next generation exists beyond them, and you know what happens beyond them, because also let's not forget, like, you know, Reen's a divine blade now, so he need to take students of his own under. I mean, maybe that could be something you kind of hear references of in the future in this universe as well. So I think that whole thing in itself is dope, and it's just that happy, like it's that heartwarming, it's, you know, feeling at the end when like I said, when the picture I used as my new background for my PS4, like that picture, just seeing that at the end and be like, thank you, you know, for taking this journey with us. This is the end of a saga, you know, but it's like, see you someday somewhere, you know. And I'm like, it filled me with, like, because once again, because at the time it's only been like, it's been 2 days, like that was like not yesterday at the time we were recording this, but the night before yesterday that I beat it. So it's still that fresh in my heart with this whole thing. So that's why it still just kind of gets me a little smiley about it. So once again, it's one of those things where I never talk about everything I want to talk about, because I didn't talk about, like, one thing that kept popping in my head was like the whole Muse thing. Like after she tried to, like, you know, the Pantagruel will go down, and it's like, if me, Le Guin, and Wallace die here, it's fine, because the battle's going to, everything's set up, so, you know, Cassius is already going to take charge of everything anyway, so if we die, this is still going to exist without us. That Reen was kind of pissed at her. He's like, yeah, I didn't say anything, but I overheard that entire conversation. And Muse was like, sorry, instructor. Like, she usually would kind of be like, oh, punish me, you know, but like, she makes some like wisecrack like that, but she knew how disappointed he was in her, and she's like, sorry. And it's like, even them being like, whoa, no like comeback or anything. And also Ash finding out that the man that saved him from Hamel was that the informant that sells you out in 3. Obviously, you know, there's a whole thing with him being controlled by the curse in this game. Like, it turns out he's the one, because obviously you learn from a side quest that he's the one that brought Ash to his mom. So that's why he's always kind of been there in his life. But he was kind of a bit of a scumbag in his previous life, and he just kept it up just because I guess he had his regrets about how he handled the whole Ash thing. But luckily, it all worked out in the end. But stuff like that. There's just so much I'm not covering. I'm sure, like, when I replay it soon enough, because I am going to jump start on my second playthrough pretty damn soon, because I can't get enough of these games. It's like, even when I'm playing other stuff, I'm like, let me pop in one of the Trails game and go through another run, you know? Even now, when now that I've beaten all, like, I've platinum 1, 2, and 3, there's still a part of me that's like, I can always go back and just kind of futz around in them or something. I don't know. But like, it's probably going to be like while I'm replaying 2, obviously, while I'm replaying 4, obviously when I get the full bonding events, I'm like, oh, I didn't get to talk about that because I didn't see that bonding event. Or there'll be certain quests that come up. I was like, oh, I wish I had talked about that, but I didn't. Oh, this conversation, this and that. So I'm sure there's a lot more. So I should make more of a point to kind of find platforms and places to talk about these games as well, you know, because obviously there's plenty of forums about this very topic. But For now, I'm going to end this here because I've been running my mouth for a very, very long time. This should be part 4, maybe part 5. I actually kind of lost count. I'm pretty sure this is still part 4. I could be mistaken. But I'm still, you know, if you ever want to hit me up about the games, I'm here. You know, bring up some of your favorite points. It doesn't even have to just be about 4. It can be about 1, 2, and 3. Or maybe if you want to talk to me a little bit about the other games. Like I said, I don't have that experience with the cross-barrel burrow guns, but I can still talk about them if you want to talk about them. Because hopefully I can mediate that situation soon enough where I can, like, especially like the moment I learn more, you know, whether it's playing or watching someone play the other games and get all that story, then I'm probably going to play through the Trails game, the Cold Steel games again with new eyes, you know, with new information and stuff like that. Granted, it's kind of spoilers because I already know everything because I know where everyone's story ends up and, you know, a little bit about where their story takes them because of obviously conversations that have come up in these Cold Steel games. But regardless, like I said, I'm going to end it here, shut my mouth. But until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.